Let's get into it now. A spoiler-free movie review of Avatar: Fire and Ash. Was it worth the over 3-hour runtime? I sat down in the theater, completely packed. It was nice to see so many people come together for a movie I don't know anybody else is excited for. And I think that's how I feel about the Avatar franchise. These movies do really well at the box office, crushing it internationally. But if I went out on the street to try to find one individual fan of Avatar, I don't know that I could do it. Do people just love these movies in secret? It's kind of like The Weeknd, who is one of the biggest artists on the planet, but I do not know a single person whose favorite artist is The Weeknd. Where are these people? Maybe if you're a fan of somebody like The Weeknd, even Imagine Dragons, maybe Nickelback or Avatar, you love these things so much, but you don't feel the need to scream it from the rooftops. You don't feel the need to go on social media and proclaim your love for these types of artists and franchise. But when it comes to who shows up, who puts their butt in the seats, making James Cameron not look like a complete psychopath spending $400 million to make a movie like this, you are there, you are showing up, you are keeping the movie theaters alive across the world, and I commend you for that. But maybe I would just like to run into one other Avatar fan. For me, when the first one came out back in 2009, I thought it was so overhyped. I hated the 3D trend that it created because after Avatar made a splash using that technology, all the movies that followed in the 2010s started doing it, and I hated that trend. It really wasn't until Way of Water came out a few years ago that I understood it and went back, watched the original, and I thought, oh, I was missing out a lot on this because I was so focused on the 3D aspects. But they are big, epic movies, big fights, big everything about them is epic. That is what James Cameron does so well, big scores. I loved Way of Water in theaters. So going into this one, I am probably the most excited I have ever been. That being said, the movie did let me down just a little bit. But before I get into the negative, I do want to talk about the positive because I sat down in that theater at 7:26 p.m. on a Friday night. I did not leave until 10:35 p.m. is when the credits rolled. That is a long time. I thought Avatar 1 and 2, they warranted that runtime. I was advocating for these movies, saying it really makes a big difference seeing these movies in theaters because you hear that a lot. Actors say it all the time. Directors say it all the time. You need to get to the biggest screen possible to take in this movie. And sometimes that's not true. That's just the thing they say. It's a marketing thing. They want you to spend your money to fund their projects, to go see these movies, to allow them to continue to do this. But not every time are these characters, are these stories actually enhanced by seeing them on the largest screen possible. When it comes to Avatar: Fire and Ash, if you do not see this movie in theaters, you are not seeing it in the right way. I was so blown away at the opening sequence that my mind was scrambled a little bit. And it is so hard for me to witness anything nowadays that feels like something I haven't experienced. It just doesn't happen. To create something that I can ingest in my eyeballs without wearing 3D glasses, because I didn't see this movie in 3D, that felt so immersive. It was kind of like if you go to somebody's house and they don't know they have that weird motion thing on their 4K TV. The first time I ever saw a 4K TV, I was blown away because it looked like a soap opera, like the person was actually inside the box. It must have been what people felt like back when TV was first created and they were like scared that the thing was going to like rush out at them or the waves were going to come through their TV, the train was going to come through. That is how I felt the first time I saw a 4K TV. I'm like, why are these people so crisp? Why is that motion so weird looking? And I know that's the setting now you can turn off. And if you see somebody with that on their TV now, you're like, why are you watching things like this? But when I sat down to watch Fire and Ash, I had that same feeling again. And it felt so weird because it was a little discombobulating. And it took me a few, maybe even 10 minutes to get fully adjusted to it because the action does start out, a lot of it in the air. And I think that is when it's the most evident, where you see these creatures flying across the screen, and there is so much depth to this motion. It is so crisp, and I've never witnessed something in a movie theater that felt more real life than real life. And I think that is something that movies are always trying to emulate. How can we make it feel like this is actually happening before you? This movie felt more HD than anybody sitting or standing right in front of me. that I could actually lean out and touch. It is this crazy amount of hyper realism where the first time I've truly felt and seen and witnessed all that movie budget used on screen. And I realized why these movies are so expensive to make, which I've been probably in the behind the scenes of this movie the most I've been in any movie so far this year. Because I think out of everything, it is the technical aspects that I'm so drawn to more so than the story itself when it comes to anything involving Avatar. This one, it really just felt like the best parts of 1 and the best parts of 2 rehashed. Where now you have these fire people, you have this new villain who is a pretty good threat, a very psychotic person who just wants to see the world burn. But when it comes to the motivations in this movie, the story behind it of Jake and his family, it is the exact same thing from The Way of Water. You have the bad guys trying to capture the good guys, and they're just constantly on the run. And it's the same plot point just played out over and over again. Now, that doesn't mean it's not entertaining. I just need something different at this point where the first hour I was totally in. If this movie would have been 2 hours long, I would have left completely satisfied, hype. I would have been just so excited about it. Because in those first 60 minutes, you get this fast-paced action where one thing is happening after another. These really great big battles where these amazing visuals just keep my eye on the screen the entire time. So much color, so much rich action and motion that I was completely drawn into and just completely sucked into this world. Now, about the 2 hour mark, it just started to become a little bit repetitive. I started to lose interest in some of these characters. It felt more comical, their interactions, and people in the theater were excited, clapping at moments. There's a moment going into the third act that feels a little bit triumphant, felt a little flat for me, but there were other people fully invested in it. So I could see the people who were big fans of this franchise actually get what they wanted out of it. And maybe you do just want the same thing over and over again. I say that as a Marvel and DC fan, where if you break down those movies, kind of is the same thing over and over again. But I think what separates those two is the characters, where I understand the reason why these characters are the way they are. These movies do so well internationally, and you can translate these movies into any language and it makes sense. And I think almost that type of filmmaking, which obviously is to make the most amount of money out of your product, makes me feel just less connected with those characters. And it's just not as novel anymore. Whenever back in 2009, seeing this blue creature that's oddly attractive in a weird way because they're wearing no clothing, aside from this like little piece covering their boobs, why do these characters even have boobs and why are they running around in basically nothing? That was a lot more novel back in 2009. Now in 2025, where we've seen this now for over 9 hours, we have a part 4 and a part 5 on the way. It is a little bit less novel, and I know they're going to change a bit of the format, switching narrators going into 4 and 5, and maybe that'll make it feel a little bit more fresh, because the way this entire movie was sold to me was the fire and ash elements, which there was a lot of fire and ash, but I was looking for a complete change in the landscape of these movies, where I felt a lot of it went back to the places we've already visited before and the visuals we've already seen. It's almost like if you go to dinner, you get a really great dish. That first bite you take is amazing. But if you have this giant platter of it that is 3 hours long, you're eventually going to get tired of that taste, no matter how great it was in those first few bites. Even the biggest sundae, by the end of it, you get kind of sick of it. And by the end of this movie, I was full. I had a virtual stomach ache just because it was so much to take in at once. And for the first time ever in an Avatar movie, maybe in any James Cameron movie, I just felt like it was not worth that 3 hour and 10-minute runtime. And I think at his age, in his 70s now, he is somebody who is more interested in the technology aspect of making a movie, even more so than the storytelling, even though he is somebody who has really great attention to detail, down to the score, down to the movements, down to the lighting, down to everything. But I think hearing him talk about this movie, saying that he doesn't care about practical effects at all, that he hasn't done that since Titanic, he is much more interested in the art of illusion, which that is what he believes that filmmaking is. And I do agree with him on some aspects, because when it came to some of the characters, especially the villains, They were straight cornball at times, where I was laughing more at them than I was with them. Felt completely one-dimensional in such a 3D movie. And the whole time I was watching Avatar Fire and Ash, I thought to myself, if I sold TVs for a living, on every TV screen in my store, I would be playing Avatar Fire and Ash, because I have to imagine this is the way you sell a TV. Look at all these color changes. Look at all this motion. I could imagine going to somebody's house who has a lot of money, has a really big TV, and they wanted to show off to me their OLED huge sound system to show me how much money they paid for their TV. They're going to have a field day with these movies, which is all really great. But then you have to think, I wonder how James Cameron feels when somebody is inevitably just going to watch this on like a TikTok stream or something. Does that throw all of his work just out the window? I think I just have to hold this movie to an entirely different standard, with it being one of the most expensive movies ever made and it not living up to my expectations from 1 or 2. For Avatar Fire and Ash, I give it 3.5 out of 5 fire arrows.